Welcome to the Adobe XD Intermediate Workshop. This is more like a welcome back because this is a continuation of the beginner workshop. So today, our schedule is going to look like this. We're going to do a quick welcome. We're going to spend some time getting set up. Because we're on Zoom, we might have to do some split screen situations between Zoom and also Adobe XD. So we're going to spend some time just figuring that out to make sure everyone's comfortable and able to see appropriately. And then we're going to start designing. And I'll show you kind of the skills that we're going to be focusing on specifically in the next slide. But at the end, we're going to see some additional links, and this will be recorded and also shared out. So if you want to watch it again later, or you want to access some of the resources that we have in the slideshow, we'll make those available to you. Before we get started, I just want to talk about the importance of XD. So according to the 2021 UX Design Tools Survey, Adobe XD is one of the highest rated and most popular design and prototyping tools. In 2021, it was in the top 5, if not the top 3. So there's some links here you can look at how companies use it today, such as Atlantic Records. Atlantic Records uses Adobe XD for their software. There's also an Adobe XD design challenge that's been popular these days. So if you go to Behance, and I have the link here in the slideshow, you can see what people are making. And it's really awesome how much you can do with Adobe XD, not only when it comes to our prototypes, our mobile apps, our websites, everything. You can create so much with it. You can actually even create shapes and graphics. So today, we're going to be focusing on these specific skills. First, essential shortcuts. In the beginning workshop, we did a lot of things manually, and there's a lot of shortcuts that if you didn't understand how to do it manually, those shortcuts might not make as much sense. So we're going to talk about those essential shortcuts. We're going to do better about managing our layers. We're going to learn how to place images, not only how to place them in multiple ways, but doing it in bulk as well. We're going to find some interesting methods on placing text. We're going to create assets and libraries. We're going to learn how to access UI kits, and then practice prototyping and sharing out our final results. Okay, so this is what we're going to be designing today. I created this app called The Garden. It's a mobile app that tracks your houseplants and helps you take care of them. Specifically, we're going to see if our little friend Palm has been watered, or we're going to get help for him, or we're going to remove him because maybe Palm died. We didn't take care of him appropriately. So we're going to create this little app. And what's interesting is notice the prototyping we're going to play with, specifically with the menu opening and closing, overlaying on top. We're going to learn how to create those little interactions, and you'll be able to walk away with some skills that you can move into your next project. So I have the assets. I'm going to share them in the chat window. I have a Google Drive folder that you should see when you open up that chat window. And whoops, here we go. So you should see this when you open up that link. Go ahead and download the assets to your computer, unzip them, and keep them open somewhere on your computer. We're going to be accessing all of those files within that folder. So I'll give us a minute to access it and do that. If you have questions or trouble accessing that link, please let us know in the chat. Excuse me. Okay, while you're doing that, let's also get set up with Adobe XD. So open up your app, your desktop app, And let's just spend some time arranging, splitting the screen between Zoom and XD, or if you have two monitors, kind of setting it up there. Let's make sure we can see both of those things. And, throughout the workshop, if I'm going too fast or you need me to go back because you missed it, feel free to speak up. We're going to take things slow, particularly with some of the design tasks in here. So I'll give us a moment to get set up. Okay, I am going to reshare my screen. Hopefully you can see my XD window on my desktop. When you open up XD, this is the window you should see. We're going to get started with a phone size. It's important we design mobile first, but this particularly is an app. So we're going to choose a phone size. I'm going to keep it at that 375 pixel wide, similar to what we did in our first workshop. So I'm going to click that one and it should launch. Okay. All right, let's get started. And if you, yes, it is, my height is 8'12". So it's the 375 by 8'12". So it's the iPhone XS 11 Pro. Okay. And while you're getting set up, I'm just going to kind of talk through just a reminder of what we're looking at here. So Adobe XD has this toolbar all around the edges on the left, the top, and the right. And we're going to be accessing stuff from all of it. In the middle here is our canvas. So this is where we're going to create our stuff that's going to show up on our app. Anything that we want to actually show is going to be within this white box here. This is our frame. Over on the left-hand side, we're going to be accessing a few things. We're going to be talking about not only layers, but also assets today. Creating reusable assets and placing it in our library and pulling them in once we've created them. And we're going to take a look at that in just a second. You want to make sure that you are under the design tab up at the top. There's three. There's design, prototype, and share. We want to make sure we're in the design tab. Over on the left-hand side, you have your cursor. So that's your select tool here. You also can create shapes like rectangles, circles, and triangles. And just as a reminder, if you create some of these shapes, it keeps that tool open. So if you want to click and move it, you have to go back and click your select tool to be able to then access your pointer. So that's just a quick reminder. And then over on the right-hand side is going to be where we access our character styles, our colors, and things like that. Okay. So we have a frame. This is going to be our splash screen. So when you open the app, it's going to have a pretty little image of leaves, and it's also going to have a button to where you can get into your app. So we're going to rename this. So I'm just going to double click the iPhone XS, which it's the name of the frame. I'm going to double click it and it highlights it in that blue. And I'm just going to name it Splash. Before we even start designing, I want to get our assets all set up and we can talk about libraries. So in the beginning workshop, what we did was we set up our colors in squares above all our canvases. We're going to do the same thing, but I want to take it a step further in this intermediate workshop. So first, let's create a square. So I'm going to click my rectangle tool over on the left. You can also hit R on your keyboard. I'm just going to create a box. It doesn't matter the dimensions because it won't be around for long. After I've created that box, I'm going to go ahead and reselect my selection tool. You can also hit V on your keyboard. The first color we're going to create, if we go over to the fill here, we'll go ahead and click fill on the right-hand side, and we're going to enter a hexadecimal value. The value is £458B75. £458B75. And I will put that into the, oh, thank you. Professor Barnett already put it in the chat for me. She's a step ahead. So I'm just going to press enter. And before I'm done with this box, I'm going to uncheck the border. I don't need the border around the box, and actually it would add extra colors into my library, and we don't want that. So it creates this pretty green color for us. There's going to be, what, three more colors? So I could copy and paste this. I also could Alt drag, but another method is Command D. So, or Control D if you're on a Windows. So Command or Control D is going to duplicate that thing, and then I can just drag it over. So with that new square, I'm going to click that color and change it. So I'm going to go back to fill. My new hexadecimal value is £0F4B35. £0F4B35. So it's a slightly darker green color, and we're going to use this for our clickable elements and also our some of our text, like within our buttons and such. This green is going to be some background colors. All right, let's do the same thing. I'm going to hit Control or Command D. Oh, you have to have something selected first. Sorry. I'm going to select this box, Control or Command D. And we're going to drag that over. And the next color is going to be just a black. So it's going to be, I'm just going to do #111. Kyle or Jonathan in the chat. So Kyle, yes, you can upload colors, but what we're going to do is we're actually making an asset library. So I'm going to have the colors denoted first, and then we're going to add it to our assets to be reusable. Richard, I named the canvas screen. Let me zoom in for you. I named it Splash. This is are going to be our splash screen. Okay, and then one more color. So I'm just going to select this, do Command or Control D again, drag, and this one's just going to be white. So I'm going to open up my fill again. I'm going to drag it to the top corner, or you can type FFF in there. Cool. So now I have all the colors I need for my app, and we're going to add it to a library. So I'm going to just select all of these colors. Make sure you open up the panel. So on the bottom, if you notice where my cursor is, on the bottom, there's an icon for libraries. Click that button. Once you click it and this panel opens, there's an option for to add colors. It's this plus sign. So I'm going to click that. And notice it's added all of my colors into my library. Once I've done that, I don't need these boxes anymore, so I can actually delete them. And what's cool is this is all accessible. So if I just created a box here, went over here and clicked one of these colors, it's going to apply that color for me. Yes, try selecting all the boxes first, and you should be able to click on this plus icon once you have libraries open. Is there a difference between the plus button under fill? Under fill. Do you mean the one, this one? It does look like it adds it to a palette, but notice, let me try it. So if we added a random red and I press plus, it doesn't seem to apply it over here to my library. It does add it to a palette over there, but I don't think they're connected. It's a good observation. Thank you. Okay, we've added our colors in, but we want to add some text as well. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the T over on the left, or you can type T on your keyboard. I'm going to click and drag. And then I'm just going to type some text in here. It really doesn't matter what I type because when you add it to the library, you're adding the character styles. So the fonts, the size, the boldness, that sort of thing. And you can change what's actually typed in each instance. So I'm just going to write, if I can type, placeholder text. I'm going to highlight. And what I used for this one is a font called DIN, D-I-N, alternate. If you don't have that on your computer, you can use something different, another sans serif font. But this is the one that I'm going to use on my side. I'm going to make it DIN, and I'm also going to make it 16 pixels. So make sure you have it highlighted before you change this stuff over on the right-hand side. And we're going to create 2 iterations of the same text. One is going to be white and one is going to be black. So what's cool is I could actually click this box. So if I go back to select, I have the text selected, the box selected. I can go over here and select white and it changes it to white. I'm going to do Command or Control D. And then I'm also going to change it to this darker color, which is not quite black, almost there. I typically don't like to use black on any UI just because it's harsher to read against a white. So I usually go with this pound 111 color. I probably could find some articles on that. So once you've done both the white version and the black version as 16 point, I'm going to highlight both and you're going to click over on the plus next to character styles. And once I've added it to my library, I don't need these anymore, so I can go ahead and delete it. Okay, any questions? We will be adding more over here on the left under components, but in terms of colors and character styles, that's going to be it. So any questions before I move on? Cool. All right. So we have our splash screen. I'm just going to zoom out a little. And I'm on a huge screen, so if it's a little small, let me know and I'll zoom in. What I want to do is we're going to create a page with a pretty leafy background. So we're going to add that background in first. So on my splash page, what I'm going to do, I'm going to go over to the left-hand side and click the rectangle tool. You can also click R on your keyboard. And I'm going to create a box that just fills the entire page. Fills the whole thing. By default, mine shows up as white with this gray border. I'm going to uncheck that border. The color itself, the fill doesn't matter because we're going to fill it with an image. Okay, I'm going to go back and select my select tool or V on my keyboard. And I'm going to access my folder that I just downloaded. So let me find it and then I'll pull it back over. So my folder with all the assets. I'm going to pull it up right next to my frame. There's one in there called leaves. Leaves is our background image. So I'm going to select leaves and I'm going to drag it into my file. Notice it highlights it blue where it's going to place. And I'm going to unclick and it fills that whole box with that image. Richard, to access links or the assets, it's going to be down here in the lower left. There's an icon called libraries. Oh, you're talking about the assets for the images. Yes, thank you, Jessica. Okay. What's cool is when you place an image, the image will stay kind of within the containers of the box. So I could move this image, not really keeping scale or anything, and it'll autofill the entire box. So in this case, it's just kind of that long horizontal look to fill the background of my my screen. Once you do that, let's open up our folder again and go to the logos folder. If you notice inside the logos folder, there are two logos. One is a color logo and one is a white logo. We are going to use both, but on the splash screen, the white's going to look best on that dark green background. So before I place it, well, you could either just drag and drop, or you can create a box like we did with this image and drag it into that box. I'm going to do that one first. So I'm going to create a rectangle. It doesn't matter where I place it for now. And maybe I'll make that rectangle like 240 pixels wide and 86 pixels tall about. I'm going to click V again. So now I have a box to drag my logo in. I'm going to go ahead and click the logo white and drag it into that box. Now that that logo's in here, you can play with scale. So maybe you want to scale it up, scale it down. And when you're scaling, make sure you either hold shift so that it keeps it proportional, or you can go over here to the toolbar on the right and change the width and height, but you want to make sure you click this lock icon. This lock icon will make sure that when you change either the width or the height individually, it'll keep the proportions of that image. It's just a preference thing. So no, the question is there a benefit to doing the rectangle first and not just dragging it in separately? No particular benefit. What XD does automatically is if you drag an image into the file, it'll paste the image into XD at half the size because it assumes that you want to export it at double the size. So for me, I like to kind of create the box based off of the exact size that I want it and then drag the image in. To me, that's a little easier. But if you don't mind dragging and then resizing, that's fine too. Okay, notice that my box has this this border on it. So I want to definitely get rid of that border. Okay, and underneath this, I'm going to create a paragraph, a little, like, it's not going to be a whole paragraph. It's going to be like a little tagline. So I want to go up to text, press my T, click and drag. And I'm going to type in, take care of your plants at home. Take care of your plants at home. Now it's showing it as this gray color, but we have character styles, remember. So I'm going to press V, make sure that this box is selected, and then go over to my character styles and click the DIN alternate white. Then I'm just going to kind of shift it around to make it so that it's aligned how I want it. That looks good to me. Okay, we also need a button. So we need a way to get into the app since this is just the splash screen. So we're going to create a button that says, check my plants. So I'm going to go over to my rectangle tool. You can also click R on your keyboard. And I'm just going to kind of create a box. Now I want the height to be 45 pixels or 40, let's do 44 pixels high. The width you can play around with. So I'm going to go over to my select tool. So however big you think maybe works best. I'm going to do mine, the way I designed it was 297 pixels wide. And I'll just kind of align it to the left of this text, just like that. Okay, now let's make it look more like a button. So I want to curve my edges, and the way you can curve your edges, I'm going to zoom in, is notice that there's these little circles in the corners. I'm going to click one of them and I'm just going to drag it in until it can't go anymore. Again, this seems to have that gray border on it. So I'm going to go over to the right-hand toolbar and I'm going to uncheck the border. I want to keep the fill white, but I'm going to uncheck that border. Any questions on how I made the corners rounded? Just want to pull it in using that little round tool. Okay, so now that we've created the background of my button, I want to put text on top of it. So I'm going to go back over to my T. I'm going to create some text that says, check my plants. Check my plants. And this time I'm not going to use a character style because I want the text to be a little larger in a different color. So I'm going to select it. I'm going to center the text. So center aligned. I'm going to place it in the middle of my button. And I want it to be like 18 pixels, a little larger than my 16 pixel text. And we're going to use one of our colors in our library. So I'm going to select that darkest green color. Darkest green color. So again, I have my DIN 18 pixels, dark green, and I've just center aligned it and placed it in my button. Notice how these grids kind of help you snap into place when it comes to centering or aligning things even to the left or right. I'll give everyone a moment to catch up. If I ever go too fast, just let me know. Put something in the chat. Tell me to slow down. No harm, no foul. So what I want to do with this button is I want to make it a reusable component. I want to put it in my library so that I can use it later, and we will in a couple screens. First, what I want to do is I want to group this together. So I want to select both my background and my text. I'm going to right click and group. You can also use the shortcut Control G or Command G. Once I have my button grouped, I want to go over to the left-hand side with my assets still open and click where it says components, add it. So I've added the button into my components. Hopefully you see that over here. I'm pointing at my screen like you can see me. We're on Zoom. Yes, you can also click and drag while holding Shift. When you add it to your asset library, notice how it turns green. It turns green. So when you just normally select something, it's blue, but if it's a component, it's green. And now, just to test it out, I'm going to zoom out. So remember, to zoom in and out, you can do Control or Command minus and plus. Control or Command minus and plus. And now with that button in my component library, I can actually click and drag and use my button other places. And I can edit my main component. So this one over here is my main component. I can go over here and just as, you know, a reference, we're not going to change this, but I can change the color and it'll change every instance of where I've pulled in my button. But I want it to be white, so I'll keep it white. If I come over here and change the fill on this instance, it will only do it for that one thing. So this is like my master component, and this one's my instance. So if I change anything about the properties on the instance, it'll just be individual to that instance. Same with the text. So I could say, you know, other button text, and it's only changing this one instance. Now I could come over here. I think there's a way where I could, edit the main component or make main component. So if I'm editing an instance and I do want to apply it to everything, you could do that as well. But there's an extra step in that. Oops. Okay. So our splash screen is done. Oh, minus one thing. We kind of need to center all of this. So I've just kind of placed my button where I feel like it best looks with this content. So for me, if I hold down Option, if I hold Option and hover, it'll tell me with this pink text how many pixels away my button is from these other elements. So mine, I'm going to do, I like working on an 8-pixel grid system. So maybe like 40. 40 pixels looks good to me. And then these are 4. Then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click and drag and select. I want to select just the logo, the text, and the button. I don't want to select the background. But sometimes that's difficult because if I click and drag or if I try to move something, it could affect the background layer. So to avoid that from happening, over on the bottom left, I'm going to go to the Layers panel. Oh, to group your button. So what you want to do, or to group 2 elements, let me repeat that. So imagine, this is your background and this is your text. The way that you're going to want to, oops, sorry. Oops. The way that you want to group it is you could click and drag to select both of them and then right click and group. You can also use the shorthand Control G or Command G. And then once you group that button, you can create your component by clicking in your assets library, clicking the plus sign next to components. Let me know if you have any more questions about that. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my layers panel. So down here under my assets, I have layers. Notice I have my splash screen artboard. And if I click any of these elements, I have, it opens up that splash screen artboard and I can see everything. So I have this leaves background, but I want to lock it. I don't want it to move. So once I select it, it highlights it over in the layers panel, and I can actually click the lock icon and lock it. And that means I could try to move it and it won't move. So that makes it a lot easier when we want to edit some of this content on top of it. So I could click and drag and select everything and then kind of just move it up and down and see where the center is. Maybe I want it up a little from the center. Looks good to me, so I'll keep it like that. Any questions on locking layers? Okay, perfect. All right, so we're done with our first screen. Yay. Let's create our second screen. So we're going to create a page that lets us know which plants we need to water. So I could start from scratch, or I can use my Command D copy paste tool. So I'm going to select my splash screen. So I've just selected the screen itself by clicking on the name up here. And then on my keyboard, I'm going to do either Command D or Control D for duplicate. And it creates a copy for me. So with the copy, it's also locked my background layer, but I want to edit that. So I'm going to click that background layer, re-click that lock icon on this copied page and unlock it. And we are going to name this page plants. We're going to name it plants. Now, I know I've copied over all the content, but I'm actually just going to, I don't need to save any of this content here. So I'm going to just kind of click and drag and delete all the content. Now, I don't want to delete my artboard, but I do want to delete all the content. So now I'm starting back from a blank slate. Any questions on copying the artboard, unlocking layers, deleting things? All right, silence is good. Silence is good. All right, I'm going to move on. So the first thing that we're going to do is add a logo up to the upper left and a menu icon in the upper right. So if we go back to the folder that you downloaded. You're going to find within the logos folder, logo color.png. I'm going to just drag that into my file. So we're using a different method now. Instead of the box and then dragging it into the box, I'm just going to drag the image into my file. Now this image is quite large for where I want to place it. So I'm going to edit the size. So I'm going to go over to the right-hand side. I'm going to make sure that the lock icon has been selected so that it keeps the constraints of the image. It keeps everything proportional. And then we're going to adjust the width to 118. 118. And I'm just going to kind of place it in the upper left. Once you place your image, we also need to place menu icons. So I'm going to go back to my folder. Go up one in your pathway and find your icons folder. Within the icons folder, we're going to look for menu.png. Let's drag that menu image into our file. And then I'm going to also place that over here onto my artboard. Notice when I move it around, it kind of tells me where it's aligned in relation to my logo, which is good. Don't want it to be way off. So I'm going to place it there, and I also kind of want to place it more consistently on the edges. So when you have something selected, you can hold down Option and you can hover over other elements and it tells you how far away it is, right? So for me, I'm going to keep it around 10 pixels from the top because we're on that 10 pixel grid with the design, and then 20 pixels from the side. And then this menu is going to be 20 pixels from the side. Okay. So to finish off my little header section of my app, I'm just going to put a line underneath this. So I'm going to find this line tool over on the left-hand side. You can also click L on your keyboard, and I'm going to click and drag. Now to keep it straight, you can hold down Shift. So I'm going to hold Shift, then I'm going to click and drag, and it keeps it perfectly straight all the way across. I'm going to go from one side of the screen all the way to the other. I'm going to go back and click my selection tool. And I'm going to keep it gray, but if I open up my border, I'm just going to make it a little bit more transparent. So I'm just going to pull this transparency down, maybe like 30%. That looks good. And then I'm going to place it so that it feels even here with the top. So for me, that's, well, we want to keep it on a 10 pixel grid. So maybe about 10 pixels from the bottom of my logo. Okay, we're almost into the fun stuff. So how are we doing? Everyone catching up? Anyone need me to review anything? All right, I see a thumbs up, so I'm going to keep going. All right, we're going to put a little header up here. So I'm going to press T on my keyboard or click the type tool or text tool over on the left-hand side. I'm going to click and drag, kind of notice how when I hover, it aligns it with my logo already. So I'm going to do that. Click and drag. And I'm going to type the words, 6 of your plants need water. Because my box was kind of small, it wrapped it onto another line. So I need to adjust some of the formatting. So I'm going to click my selection tool. I'm going to drag it so that it's on one line. I'm also going to make it left aligned. I want it to be 20 pixels. So I'm going to have to drag it a little bit more. And if we open up our assets panel, I want it to be this pound 111 color, this black color. So it's just a heading. If I made this one of the green colors, it might look like a clickable element, which we don't want to do. We don't want to confuse clickable elements. So as just a header, we're going to keep it the black color. And you can place it where you'd like. I'm going to place it about 20 pixels from this line and keep it kind of vertically aligned with my logo here. So pixels. So what for fonts specifically, where do you mean pixel? Like for the font size, for the width of it, for the spacing, for font size. So when if you click into that box and kind of highlight all your text, over on the right-hand side, you'll see a panel that says text. It gives you your font family. It also tells you your font size. So this is in pixels. It doesn't necessarily say pixels, but it is pixels. So we're going to change that to be 20. Okay. How do I scale text within text box to a larger font size? So you just need to make sure it's highlighted. Because if you just click the box and then change the text size, it might not actually scale the text to be larger or smaller. So you'll have to make sure you double click inside of your text box and then you can like highlight it and change the font size over here. Any other questions? All right, I want to add like a little flair to my headings with a small little under border line. I just like the look of them. I've been looking on Behance, and that's something that's been piquing my interest. So what I want to do is I want to click R on my keyboard or click this rectangle tool, and I'm just going to create a little rectangle. It doesn't have to be big, like 26 pixels wide and 3 pixels tall. 26 pixels wide, 3 pixels tall. And I'm putting that pixel size as up here under transform, under the transform panel on the right. 26 wide, 3 tall. I'm going to go back over to the left, click my selection tool. And I want to fill it with this lighter green color. And then I want to uncheck my border. 3 pixels was the height. 26 wide, 3 high. So it's a small little, it's going to be a small little kind of like header underline embellishment. And then I filled it with the lighter green color and I unchecked the border. Okay, so now we're going to get into some fun. We're going to create, images or like these cards of all of our plants that needs water. So we're going to start with one card, and then we're going to use our repeat grid to just kind of auto-generate the rest of them. So I'm going to zoom in here. I'm going to click my rectangle tool again. And I'm going to create a box. That box I want to be the width 158, height 181. So width 158, height 181. And okay, I'm going to make it this lighter green color. So I'm going to go over to my assets panel, click the lighter green color, and it's going to autofill with that color. My XD automatically puts that border on it, and I don't necessarily want that border. So I'm going to uncheck that border. I'm going to go back and click my selection tool or V on my keyboard. And I want to curve the edges. I don't want it to be so straight. So I'm going to zoom in, find that little dot in the corner and drag it in. And I think that looks good. So kind of drag it to where you think you like the corner. I won't be so specific on that. So just click and drag in. Before we do anything else, I want to put a drop shadow effect on it. Make it look clickable, make it look like a card. So I'm going to click the box. Over on the right-hand side over here, you see effects. So for me, it's under appearance. I'm going to check where it says drop shadow. And then I'm going to change some of the specifics of the drop shadow. So for X, I'm going to keep it 0. For Y, I'm going to do 3. And for B, B stands for blur, so how much it'll blur, 6. So X0, Y3, B6. And then I just want to change the opacity of it. So I'm going to click the box here. And I'm going to adjust the opacity to 16%. It must have saved my values from the last time I used it. So X0, Y3, B6. And make the opacity 16%. So now we have a nice little subtle shadow going on behind the card. Yes, this will be recorded and posted so you can access it later. Thank you. Okay, over top of the card, we want to put where the image would be of my plant. So I'm going to go back to my rectangle tool and I'm going to create a box here. So the box, I'm going to go back to my selection tool. I want it to be the same width as the card, which is going to be what, 158. So 158 wide. And this time I want my height to be 143. 143. I'm going to kind of place it so that it's at the top of my box here. And I want the top edges to curve like the card, but I don't want the bottom edges to curve like the card. So the way you would do that is just hold down Option and drag that corner. I'm just going to drag it to be about the same as the card behind it. And then do it for my other corner. Hold down Option and drag. Option and drag. I don't want the border on this as well, so I can uncheck the border. In terms of the fill, it doesn't matter because we're going to place a picture in there. One last thing we need to do before we repeat our card and work the Adobe XD magic is we're going to add some text. Here, this is where our plant name is going to go. So I'm going to go over to text. I'm going to click and drag in this green. And it doesn't matter what you type in there. I'm just going to say plant. Plant name. How about that? Plant name. Click the selection tool. And I'm going to click my, my white character style. And then I'm going to center the text. Okay, so to repeat what I just did, I created a text box. I typed in the text box plant name. I chose my white character style. So it should be DIN 16. And then I center aligned it and kind of centered it within this bottom section here. Okay, so I was just checking if you need to group anything. So what I want to do is any questions on any of this before I go, because our card is done. Cool. So I'm going to click and drag and select my entire card. So everything about my card should be selected. The background, the white box on top, the shadow behind it, the text on top. I'm going to go to the upper right, and where it says repeat grid, I'm going to click that. And notice it's giving you a visual of what that should do. So I'm going to click repeat grid. And it's added this green around it with these little handles. So what I want you to do is make it 2 cards wide and 3 cards tall. Oops. So in total, you should have 6 cards. And notice how mine is kind of moving off the page. That's okay, because we can adjust all the spacing. So 2 cards wide, 3 cards tall. I'm going to hover over and it should highlight the margins as pink. So I'm just going to kind of adjust the margin. I'm going to click and drag in and make my margins about 8 because I'm working on that grid there. And then I'm going to center all of that. So my margins are 8. I've centered it on my page. Any question on that repeat grid? This is really the magic of XD. What did you do to duplicate it like that again? Okay, so what I did was in the upper right, there's an option. Mine's different right now because it's already created, but it says repeat grid. So you're looking for an option in the upper right that says repeat grid. Click repeat grid, and then you can drag these handles to make it. Can you move the 6 card as 1 unit? Yes. So now that it's all grouped, see how if I select anywhere, it's going to move it all as 1 unit. And notice it's kind of like clicking into place whenever I move it, telling me that my margins are consistent above and below that header, which is nice. Yes, you probably can make the cards auto center. So if you click on the grid on the upper right, you see these align tools. If you click this one that center aligns, it'll center it within the frame. I wouldn't do the vertical align just because I don't know if it's going to be, because of all this stuff up here, actually, if it will look good align center like that. But this particular option should let you center align. So you just have to select it first. So make sure it's selected, and then you can move it, or you can click that tool. Any questions on that grid? Okay, are you ready to see more magic? I'm excited to show you. So open up your folder with all of your images and things. Go back and find the folder called plants. Find the folder called plants. Within that, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There should be 6, so this might be fun. There's JPEG images in here. I'm trying to think which one I messed up on. Hold on. Okay. Bonsai, delete bonsai. Bonsai didn't make it. Bonsai died. I didn't water him in time, so we're going to trash him. Hopefully everyone caught that change. So within our plants folder, I deleted bonsai. We don't need him. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of my images. And the way that I would do that is I can select the top image, hold down Shift, and select my bottom image. Now I don't want to select this .txt file just yet. So select my top image, hold down Shift, select my bottom image. Then I'm going to click and drag into my first box here. Notice how it's highlighted blue. And I'm going to unclick. And it places all of my plant images. For real, some magic. Anyone have questions on what we just did? I know I'm asking that 100 times, but I want to make sure I'm going at the right pace for everyone. Perfect, thank you. So we can do the same thing with the TXT file. The images were not the same size, but I did crop them so that the plant was centered. So I did have to do some curating. That's why bonsai didn't make it, because bonsai didn't fit very nicely. So for the .txt file, I can actually click and drag that into where the plant name is. See where plant name is, and it's highlighting it blue. I'm going to click and drag, and it's going to add all my text. So if you have content, you can separate that content with line breaks, and each line break will go into a new repeat grid item. Mine's not going into all the slots. Did you have all your images selected, and did you check if you placed it into the white box that was on top of the green? So just to kind of repeat what that looks like, selected the top, selected all of my images, right? Shift, select, drag into that white box that's on top of the green. And it should auto-populate all of my repeat grid. If it doesn't, that's okay. You can just drag and drop it into each individual slot. That will work too. If you want the images to display in a different color, do you have to select the images in that order before drag and drop? Or in a different order, I think I said color. Yes, so the way that the order is in your file system is the order in which it's going to show up in your repeat grid. So notice I did mine alphabetically, and my text file is also alphabetical, so it will match. My text didn't auto center when I inserted it. If you need to adjust the centering, you can always come in here and select and then press center. So if you edit one of the cards, it will edit all of them, even if I move it. So you might be able to adjust that. Perfect. Okay. Any more questions on repeat grid or adding the text or the images in? Okay. Let's create our menu. So I want to create a menu where when I click on this icon, the menu will pop out from the left. So first, what I want to do is I just need this artboard. I'm going to delete everything off of it, but I just need this artboard. So I'm going to click the plants artboard, and I'm going to click Command or Control D, D for duplicate. And then I don't really need anything content-wise from the screen, so I'm just going to click and drag and delete all the content. Now I want to keep the artboard, just not the content. I want to rename this menu. This artboard is named menu. Okay, we're gonna have to adjust the size of it because I want the menu to pop out from the right, but I don't want it to fill the whole screen. I want it to fill like 3/4 of the screen. So I'm gonna select my artboard, and I'm actually gonna adjust the width of it. So over on the right-hand side where it says W, I'm gonna adjust the width to be 287. 287. Now, when you prototype, some things get funky if you don't add, like if you try, because I could change this color of the artboard to the color I want, but when you start doing overlays and things like that with prototyping, it actually just makes that artboard translucent. So instead of making this artboard a color, I'm actually going to put a rectangle on top of it and make it that color. So I'm going to press the R on my keyboard or choose the rectangle tool. And I'm going to create a rectangle. And I'm going to fill that rectangle with this light green color and uncheck the border. I want to adjust the size of this rectangle. Let me tell you why. So when this little piece overlays my artboard here, my plants page, I want a little shadow so that these greens aren't bleeding into each other. I want a little shadow on my menu. So in order to do that, I need to make this rectangle a little smaller than my artboard. So I'm going to make it 271 pixels wide. And I'm going to align it with the right side of my artboard. So that there should be some white peeking out on the left. So width 271. After I do that, I want to add a shadow. Again, if I have that drop shadow, these greens won't be bleeding into each other since they are the same green. So with this green box still selected, I'm going to go over to the right and click drop shadow. Now, the properties of the drop shadow are going to be a little bit different. So X is going to be -6. Y is going to be 3. B is going to be 16. And then I want to open my box and make the opacity around 27 or 30. I'll do 30. So again, X -6, Y 3, B 16, opacity 30, 30%. It does sound like a game of bingo. Okay, now I'm going to add my menu items. So I'm going to click on my T over on the left for text, click and drag. And my first menu item is going to be water my plants. Water my plants. Click my selection tool and kind of center within that green box. And I'm going to put it like maybe 48 to 50 pixels from the top. I'm going to select my text, do Command or Control D to duplicate and drag. I'll make that about like 24 pixels from that first item, or you can kind of visually place it. My next menu item is going to be all plants. All plants. This will be how I can see all of the plants that I have. I'm going to duplicate again, click and drag. Notice how it has that pink to highlight and tell me that it's equal spacing from the first two items. And I'm going to change my text to settings. And 2 more menu items just for fun. I'm going to Command or Control D again, drag until I see that pink box. And say add a plant. And one more time, Command or Control D, drag until I see the pink box. And then my last menu item will be shop for plants. This is automatically 16. I kind of want to make it bigger. Maybe 16 is fine. I want to go 18 with it. So I'm gonna make it 18. So the session recording will be posted. It'll also be available on the Spark website that you use to register. So keep an eye in the hallway. Oh, they're gone. I'm gonna say the hallway Slack channel. Okay, water my plants is the menu item or the page that I'm currently on. So I want that to look visually different than the other ones. So I want to select everything except that one. So all plants, setting, add a plant, and shop for plants. So I'm holding down Shift while I'm clicking each of those items. And I'm just going to adjust the opacity of it to maybe around 60% or so. Those are not selected. I am on this page, so visually I want this to be brighter. And last thing I need to do is add an option to close my menu once it's opened. So back in your folder, if you go back to icons, there's an icon in there, x.png. Go ahead and click and drag that into your file. It's just an X icon. I'm just going to drag it on my artboard in that corner on the right-hand side. I'm just kind of moving things around so visually where I think they best look. And now we have our menu. Any questions on anything from the menu? Okay, so there is one more page to design, but I want to save time for the prototyping because I think that it's really important to see how this menu looks and feels and is prototyped. So we'll leave that page for the end if we have time. But let's actually start to prototype. So I'm going to go to the upper left, and we're currently in the design tab, but I want to click over to prototype. I'm going to scroll over to my splash page and click on my check my plants button. It should highlight it and put an arrow on the right-hand side. I'm going to click that arrow and drag it over to my plants page. So what this is saying is when I click this button, it should take me to the plants page. Over on the right-hand side, you can customize things about the prototype. So the trigger is going to be a tap. So when I tap on it, it'll change the page. You can change the type. For this, I just want to transition. Destination is plants. Animation, I'm just going to do a dissolve. You can specify easing and duration. I think this all works. So we're going to keep it like that. On the plants page in the upper right, I'm going to click on that hamburger menu. And I'm going to click and drag over to my menu page. So right now the trigger is tap and the type is transition and all this, but we're going to change it. So we're going to keep the trigger tag, but the type is going to be overlay. So change the type to overlay. And notice on my plants page, it's added this like green thing. That's asking me where I want the overlay to live. And I want it to be all the way on the right-hand side because I want it to come out from the right and slide in to the left. So I just kind of dragged it over to the right-hand side of the screen. So trigger tap, type overlay, destination, menu, animation. I don't want it to be dissolved. I actually want it to slide. So I want it to slide from the right to the left. So we're going to click slide left. Slide left. I'm going to change my easing to ease in and my duration to 0.6 seconds. Okay, and then I kind of want to do the opposite for the X. So I'm going to click my X, drag it to plants. And let's just do that for now. Okay. Oh, notice that. Remember when I said that the background turns into a transparent? It's doing that for my plants page. So we need to add a background to it. So I'm going to go over to the design tool. I'm going to click my rectangle. And I'm going to click and drag the entire width of my plants page, width and height. Just keep it white, uncheck the border. Go back to my selection, right click, and go send to back. So all I did, just to repeat, on the plants page, I just created a box that's the same as the width and height of my screen. I made it white with no border, and then I right click and chose send to back. Okay, let's test the prototype. So I'm going to go back to prototype, click on the splash page. Notice if I click on splash, I have the option of making this my home screen. I'm going to go ahead and do that. Once I make it my home screen, it will pop up this label that says Flow 1. And then I'm going to go to the top right and click on the play button. When you click the play button, it'll pop up a window, which is previewing your app. And you can play with clicking around. So I'm going to click check my plants. It's going to go to my plants page. I'm going to click my menu. My menu is going to slide in. I'm going to click my X, and my menu is going to slide out. Is everyone's doing that? All right, I have a thumbs up. Any more thumbs ups? Thank you, Professor Burnett. Awesome, more thumbs ups, good. I'll give us a minute to get there. This is really fun. This is, again, the magic of XD. It's cool to see how a prototype looks so real, right? Just something we designed with text and background images. We link them together and it creates something that looks so real. Notice how that shadow really adds to that menu, right? That drop shadow. So it makes it so that these greens don't bleed into each other. It really does look like it's overlaying on top of this screen. Yes, 30%. Thank you. All right. So we have about 15 to 20 more minutes. Do you think we can squeeze in an extra screen? I was gonna say squeeze in an extra screen. Tongue twister. All right, let's do it. So I'm gonna just close this out. Go back to my design tool, or design tab. I'm gonna click my plants page, and I'm gonna click Command or Control D. So I'm duplicating my plants page because it's the right size, and it actually includes an image that is going to work really well for this page. Once I duplicate that plants image, I'm just going to rename my artboard, and I'm going to name it Details. Just name it Details. Okay. You know what? We can actually delete all of the content here. We're gonna just pull in some of our images and things from our assets folder. So I'm just gonna delete all of the content. We're gonna start with a blank screen. And I want to keep my background color. You might have to redraw your background white box, but we want to keep that. Okay, first things first, I'm going to create a box where my image will be placed. So I'm going to go back to my rectangle tool, and I'm going to create a box that is the entire width of my screen, but the height is going to be 481. Height 481. So width 375, height 481. Now go back to my select tool. Let's find our assets folder and go back to our plants folder and find palm.jpg. We're going to drag palm into that box. We don't want that border either, so let's uncheck that border. But palm is cute. Palm is looking cute. Let's work top to bottom. So we need a way to get back to our plants page. So if we go back to our assets folder, inside of the icons folder, there should be an arrow.png. Let's drag arrow.png into our file and place it in the upper left. In the upper left. So this will be how we get back to our plants page. Any questions so far in any of that? Width and heights or names of files or anything? Cool. Okay, if there's no questions, I'm going to move on. I'm going to create some details about palm down here, but I want to do that in a box. So I'm going to create another rectangle. Rectangle is our friend. I'm going to make my box around 332 pixels wide. 332. And my height is going to be 261. 261. So 332 wide, 261 high. And I want to fill it with the light green color. So the same color as my menu. Notice how I've overlaid it on slightly on top of my image. So it's up to you on visually how you want to place that, but I do want it horizontally center and then overlapping my image just a little bit. I also don't want the super straight edges. So I'm going to grab that little dot in the corner and kind of make my edges more rounded. I also don't want my border, so I'm going to uncheck my border. So I rounded my edges, I overlapped it on top of my image, and I unchecked my border. Okay, we're gonna put a little title here. So I'm gonna go to my text tool, click and drag, and type the words palm. Palm. I'm gonna make palm left aligned. And let's make it a little bit larger. Let's do 24 pixels. I have to highlight it first. 24. So left aligned 24. And then I'm just gonna place that where I think works best. That looks fine. I want some text underneath it. So we know the drill. We're going to Command D or Control D to copy this text, drag it underneath. I'm going to double click to highlight, or you can click and drag to highlight. We're going to change it to the text to 6 months old. She's a young palm. I want to change this to not be 24 pixels. I want it to be 14. And I'm going to kind of move it and adjust. I like it about 4 pixels from palm. So I'll keep that there. I'm going to copy this again because I want some more text. So Command D or Control D for duplicate. Click and drag. And then I'm going to change this text to, it's time to water your palm. Just make it one line. Okay. 6 months old is kind of a status, and just hierarchy wise, I kind of like it if it would be a little less white. So I'm going to go over to the opacity, make it more transparent. Just a little, it doesn't have to be crazy. Maybe 90 or 85. That way there's a little more hierarchy in the text. And this is where we're going to use our components. So that button that we created, let's drag it in. So open up your assets, find your component, and drag in your button. I'm not only going to drag in one button, I'm going to drag in 2. We're just going to stack it right on top of each other. And then I'll just work on placement. So wherever you think kind of looks best placement wise. That's good. And these are instances of my main component. So I can change the text and it would be fine. So this first button, I'm going to change the text, and I'm going to have to double click a couple of times. I had to double click twice in order to highlight my text. Since it is a component, there's a few layers we have to get under in order to actually be able to edit it. So instead of check my plants, I want to label this button I watered my palm. It wrapped it, so I'm going to have to make my text a little bit larger, or my box a little larger. And then I'm going to change the second button as well. So I'm going to have to double click twice to get there. And I'm going to say, get help for my palm. Maybe palm's not looking so well, needs a doctor. We're going to offer that option. And then once I make the box larger, I need to kind of move it to be centered within my button. So just, keep that in mind. You might have to readjust and make it centered within the button. And hopefully those grids are on, so it's locking into place when you move it. Last thing I want to do is I'm going to add a link under here, an option to remove. Maybe palm died. I didn't water them in time, and I just need to remove the plant. So I'm going to go to text, create a little box, and type remove. It's invisible because it's white. So I'm going to have to highlight. I'm going to change it to this dark green color, dark green over in my assets, my color library. I'm going to want to underline it to make it look like a link. So I'm just going to use the shortcut Command U or Control U to underline. I'm going to center align. Go back up to my cursor and kind of adjust so that it's centered on my screen. I could also go up here to the top right and center align. And then I'll just kind of play with where placement wise I think it should go. All right, any questions on our details screen? Or are we ready to prototype? All right, let's prototype them together if there's no questions. So I'm going to go back to my prototype tab and go back to my plants page. I'm going to click on the palm card specifically, and I'm going to have to double click to get there. Because a first click is going to be my whole repeat grid with all of my cards. A second click is going to be specifically the palm card. And then I'm going to drag over to my details page, but it's saved from when we did menu. So it's trying to act like it's an overlay, but we don't want it to be an overlay. We just want to change screens. So I'm going to adjust the type to transition and adjust the animation to dissolve. We can keep these in, that's fine, but I want to adjust the duration to 0.2. So trigger tap, type transition, destination details, animation dissolve, ease in, 0.2 second duration. Lastly, we need a way to get back. So I want to click on this arrow on the details page and click and drag over to the plants page. Notice my symbols down here. My instances of the symbols are saving my button location as if it should be taking you to the same place as this original button. So you want to remove those. So the way that you can remove interactions is if you click that little, let me zoom in. If you click this little nodule here and just kind of drag off, see, click the nodule and drag off, it removes that prototype action altogether. Okay, and once I've done that, I can click the play tool and I can click through, check my plants. Here's my menu. I can click palm. I can go back. Looks good. Any questions? Anything, anyone, anything we need to see again, or we have questions about? Why did I remove those two gray lines? Oh, did you mean the ones on the buttons? Yes. So what it was doing, because this button was a component, it saved all the properties of this original main component. One of those properties was this prototypes to this plants page, right? So if I go over here and I click this, it's prototyping to my plants page. So when I dragged in an instance of that component, it saved that property. So it also transitioned our prototype to that plants page, but I didn't want that because these would go to different pages. We don't have those designed, but this would go to different pages. So the way I removed it was just clicked on that nodule, dragged, and it removed that option. Yeah, hopefully that makes sense. Cool. So a few more minutes left. If you have other questions, pop them in the chat, but I'm going to keep chatting. So one thing you can do is it's really cool is once you have something prototyped, you can actually record yourself. Yes, name or file, we'll get there. Thank you. Okay, so we can actually record ourselves walking through the app. So it'll record my cursor movements and how it works. So this little dot up here, I can record a video. So I'm going to click that. Notice it shows this circle as if this is my thumb. I'm going to click that. I'm going to click my menu. I'm going to click palm. I'm going to go back. And then I'm going to end my recording. And then it can save. So it'll save as an MP4. Just going to save it on my desktop for now. The garden app. Save. So that's super cool. So if you design something in class or you want to share it with someone or upload it to social media or YouTube or things like that, you can record it and it'll save as an MP4 so you can share from there. And don't forget, we want to save our file. Yes, that part is super important. I just double clicked up here where it says Untitled, and then I can rename it. So I'm going to name it the Garden Plant App. You can name it whatever you want. And save. And now it's saved to the cloud too, so I can always access this from any computer as long as I log in with my Adobe ID. All right. Last thing you can do is you can share it. So, so if I go to the share up in the toolbar, I can create a link and show who can access this. Once I and you can also do a setting. So design review allows people to comment on your screens. Development will offer different options, presentation, user testing. So it's good to choose which type of sharing you're doing because it'll offer different options within the share. I'm going to create a link. Now I can copy and paste that. Notice it also has a Behance. I can share on Behance, which is super cool. Then I can send this to friends. Something you might want to try is maybe you copy the link and send it to your phone and try playing with the interactions on your phone. Open up the menu, close the menu. Super fun. All right. Let me switch back over to our presentation. All right, so this, again, kind of just touched the surface and a lot of the things you can do. Hopefully, now that we understand things like prototyping, interactions, managing our layers, like locking our layers, placing our images, placing our text from TXT files, things like that. That can also apply to the projects you do in class or on your own. There are ways you can keep learning on your own. So here are a bunch of resources. This will be made available for you. Specifically, there's that Adobe XD Daily Challenge. I highly recommend you either try yourself or just look at Behance and see what other people are doing with XD. It's really inspiring. And then there's a bunch of LinkedIn learning videos or tutorials on XD that you can use in order to keep growing in your skills. Any final questions before we log off? Cool. All right, well, I recommend record, post in the hallway channel, share what you learned during this Adobe workshop today. We'll make the link available to you. And otherwise, have a great night and thank you.